All right, Kateline, it's time to air some dirty laundry. Or actually, it's not dirty laundry, it's a peek behind the curtain. Because I'm going to bring the Holt heads in on something that we've been dealing with since day one. You ready for this?
Hit me.
For whatever reason, when we started the pod, we were getting hella listens. And then in October of 2023, it slowly started to decline. And that decline has never risen. It's only gone down since then. I'm talking a year and a half of this. And now, Kate, we both know it's not because of the content. The content's good.
It's gold.
We're making gold over here, no doubt. So I think it's a conspiracy. Somehow the algorithm is out to get us.
Uh-huh.
I'm thinking about what's causing it, what's tripping them up. What if it's because we have gunshots in our theme song? What do you think?
Oh, my bad. I put them there.
No, don't say my bad. It's not my bad because it's rockin' and rules, but I have a fun idea to test this theory, okay?
Okay.
The next few episodes, I'm going to put other sounds over it, okay? And let's just see what happens.
Okay.
Let's just see what happens.
I'm on board with this.
Who knows what it's going to be, but it's going to be the most wholesome content the algorithm has ever seen. What do you think?
I love it. And if that doesn't work, then do we just quit?
No, we keep troubleshooting. Maybe the algorithm hates the color purple, in which case I'll be in big trouble, design-wise. But hey, we'll pivot, okay? Because if we could do one thing on here, Kate, it's freaking pivot to make the algorithm happy. It's something we always say.
We slave to the algorithm.
Exactly. Hey, slavery's coming up in this episode, so why don't we kick into that theme? Slightly modified.
I'm Lester Holt.
What up, Holt heads? Kurt Money here, alongside my co-host,
Kateline.
and we are here to talk about a mammoth bonkers episode. I mean, I was thinking last week when we were like, this is a snooze, like this is so ho-hum. The Dateline gods heard us and said, don't worry, because the Devil Will Write is about to be popping off. Am I right?
You're right.
This episode is called The Devil Will Write. Piss poor title. Lester had what the title should be when he said, they call them Mommy and Clyde.
They were known as Mommy and Clyde.
That's good. That's good wordplay right there. And I just wish the Dateline had the balls to call the episode Mommy and Clyde. But anyway, here we go. An elderly socialite is reported missing from her stately New York City brownstone. When Sante Kimes and her son Kenny are arrested, an extensive investigation reveals many decades of crime, deception, and murder that has captivated the nation. AKA Mommy and Clyde. So overall, did you like the ep, Kate?
Well, I have an issue with that IMDb description.
Okay, hit me.
I don't know that I would count that as a brownstone.
Oh, okay. Real estate Kate is getting in on this. Okay. They called it a mansion. Does that help, or is that...
It's a mansion. It's like a Gilded Age era, like, was it Upper West Side, Upper East Side? It was Millionaire's Row. It's not really a brownstone, and it's not even made of brown stone.
A smaller crowd gathered for a dinner party at a mansion on East 65th Street. The hostess was an 82-year-old widow named Irene Silverman.
And our story begins July 4th of 1998. Now, we're talking about how she owns this building. She's super loaded. She, grew up being a dancer. Somewhere along the lines, she made enough money where because she was bored, she bought a mansion outright.
Her tenants included some A-list celebrities.
Do you remember a few of these celebs?
Yeah, and, well, one was Lenny Kravitz.
Yeah, and Daniel Day-Lewis. And then further down the row, Shaka Khan. Still cool.
I mean, I would be hanging out with Shaka Khan every night. I'm sure she did.
You know, between those three, you're right. I'd be hanging with her, too. I don't want to hang out with Mr. Method.
I've abandoned my child!
No.
And I don't want to hang out with Rockstar Guy.
I ain't gonna go my way. No.
So, Irene Silverman, she has a total 4th of July bash. And they're talking about how the party was rocking and everybody had, patriotic hats or whatever. Flash forward to the next day. Irene Silverman is missing. Kate, usually when we hear this, what's the response we get from the cops when we hear that someone's been missing for a few hours?
Well, if it hasn't been 24 hours, then we're not going to look into it yet. Or, she probably just ran off. But this time, a woman with money and influence goes missing, and they take it seriously within an hour. Because her staff were the ones to call the police. They realized they didn't know where she was. She was nowhere to be found. And they know that if something happens to her, they're all screwed.
That's true. That's a good point. I mean, it's so funny they didn't even blink twice about it, like about saying like, well, you have to wait this time. It wasn't even addressed in the Dateline, but the detective who was like a rookie at the time who got the case, it really gave us a peek into why cops don't want to start a missing persons case though, right? The detective on the show is like, yeah, and since I was the rookie, they were like, here, you got to do this one because we hate doing missing persons because they're tedious, he said.
And they said, well, kid, this is yours because no one really wants a missing person case. It's very tedious work.
They're tedious.
Good job, guys.
So
I was laughing because as soon as this started with the very first talking head from one of those cops, we're hit with this super heavy, thick New York accent.
Beautiful artwork.
And it was
yeah.
so funny. He's like, listen, like immediately, first line out the gate.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it kind of sounds like 1981 Milwaukee.
It does. It sounds a lot like it. But our listeners don't know what that means.
That's okay, because that's why I say, listeners, to get that, you got to peep the Patreon. Clip.
I get the caller this time.
Easy, Tiger.
And now we're back. Okay, not only is Irene missing, 2 other people. We got staff members missing and a tenant. Maybe one of those people is the reason for Irene missing, we don't know. But they do find blood outside this brownstone.
Diabolical.
But they find blood out there, so now things are getting real. They track down the staff member. He had actually fled to Atlanta, it looks like, because he flew to Atlanta the day that Irene goes missing. And even though he had access to her finances and stuff, they're like, no, it wasn't that guy. Let's focus on this tenant. Mm-hmm. Now, what was the vibe about this tenant around the halls of the Silverman Mansion?
Well, everyone thought he was a weirdo. He kept to himself. Irene herself even said that she wasn't so sure about him, but she decided to rent him the room anyway.
Her friend Janice said Irene regretted that decision right away.
He was very secretive. She felt that something was wrong.
And then other people noted that there was an older woman that would sometimes stay with him in his room, in the same bed. And this guy's in his, he's like in his late 20s. So seeing like this older woman in bed with him was kind of like, well, that's interesting.
Well, they're assuming that they're in bed together because this tenant will not let in the maids. We talked to one of them, right?
There was a woman in the apartment with him.
He had a lady in there that was a little older. That's all they knew. But Irene was so suspicious she was taking notes.
Love that.
I do too, but if she hadn't been murdered and been right that there were some evil people in there, I'd have been kind of like, hey, Nosy Nancy, keep walking. But in this case, it's like, Irene, good on you, because you were right.
She was right. She seems awesome.
She sure did. She sure did. They said that she was a lot like Auntie Mame, which is a reference I kind of get. I looked it up. It's a Rosalind Russell musical. Are you familiar with Auntie Mame?
Feels like that would be in your wheelhouse.
I know, and I love Rosalind Russell because she's in His Girl Friday. Don't worry, I'm on the top. So, I mean, obviously it's a blind spot. I feel like I should peep it tonight.
You're going to peep it tonight.
Yeah.
I'm your Auntie May!
Okay, so we find out about this tenant, and not only is a total weirdo, but Irene had had enough and was actually going to evict this guy. So now we're thinking, we got to get our hands on this dude. We mentioned he also would walk against the wall to, avoid security cameras. And she would see his feet underneath the door, listening whenever they were out front or whatever. Oh,
very creepy behavior.
And this guy's name was Manny Guerin.
His name was Manny Guerin. He didn't have a reference or an ID, but gave her $6,000 in cash up front.
And the cops send over a sketch artist. They got this sketch of this guy, and they do a press release. They're throwing it out all over the wire. And someone responds, but it's not a civilian. It's another cop. And he goes, whoa, that's not Manny Guerin. I know that guy's face. That dude is named Kenny Kimes. And I've got him and his mom in jail as we speak. This is the first bomb drop, Kate. Where's your hat at?
I'm thinking, when in the history of police sketches has this ever happened?
Yeah.
Where it looks exactly like the person, and within 2 hours, they're like, oh, I know him. We got him.
Yeah, and, okay, the sketch, I guess, looked like him. I feel like we can't give the sketch guff because it worked. Somebody recognized him as being Kenny Kimes.
I did think this sketch looked remarkably like him.
But you know what this reminded me of? There was the Bond agent episode, Hibiscus, where that serial killer, they had a sketch out, and then somebody's like, oh, this guy's already arrested for auto theft, which is why Kenny Kimes is in jail right now.
Good call.
Turns out when we were looking for Victor, he was in custody by Beverly Hills Police Department for auto theft.
So this detective from the other side of New York, it's like, this guy's name is Kenny Kimes. We just arrested him for Grand Theft Auto, along with his mother, Sante Kimes.
Sante.
And this cop takes pictures to the staff and says, here's Kenny Kimes. Is this who you think Manny is? And the whole staff agrees, absolutely, that's him. Now here's when Dateline does their first rewind, okay? Because now we go all the way back to like the 60s or some shit in Hawaii, okay? And now we're here to get the story on Sante. And this is where we're introduced to Sante's other son, Kent Walker. He's like the one who wasn't involved in all this stuff.
And
right?
It's a little confusing because his name is Kent and the other son's name is Kenny. But Kenny is named after Sante's second husband,
Sure.
Kenneth Sr. So I can understand how that happened because Ken Sr. wanted the kid named after him, even though Kent already existed. But very confusing. However, I really liked Kent. His voice was maybe one of the deepest voices I've heard on this show. So deep that I thought they had actually purposely pitch shifted it down. It sounded fake. It sounded like they were hiding his identity.
My mother's entire life's made up. You know, you get that one little germ of truth. She always started out with that kernel.
Obviously, they weren't. He was on camera. But it was so low. And he reminded me of, what's his name? Off to the Googs. He reminded me of Frank Langella.
Okay. I see it in the cheeks. I see it in the cheeks in the middle face area.
The mouth and the voice, too.
All right. Well, hey, I'm going to cue up a side-by-side. We'll let the Holt heads weigh in.
Wait, he dated Whoopi Goldberg for 5 years?
Of course. They were a power couple.
I thought, well, she and Ted Danson were a power couple.
It turns out if you're dating Whoopi, you're in a power couple because she rules.
Love Whoopi. I'd watch Whoopi in anything.
Absolutely. Including a movie where she owns the Knicks, co-starring her lover, Frank Langella. Brought it back around. Have you ever seen that movie?
What's it called?
I think it's called Ed. Eddie. Not Ed TV, just Ed. Eddie.
You know, I think I have seen it.
Yeah.
That does sound familiar, yeah. When I was a kid in the 90s, I watched everything she was in. I was just talking to another mutual friend of ours. She and I were just talking about how when we were kids, we both rented Made in America like dozens of times. We were obsessed with that movie.
Yeah, I mean, that was the day where we go to the video store, you recognize a face. You think the font is colorful enough, this thing's not going to be too sad. You rent that, right? That was always the case. It's like, well, they're on the cover of the box. I got to see it.
Also, if there was like a sexy lady on it, it's like, well, that's getting rented.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe there might be some nudity.
Obviously, Who Framed Roger Rabbit is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Cool.
And I think it's because of Jessica Rabbit. I think 4-year-old me was like fully lezzing out to this cartoon lady.
Okay, Jessica Rabbit's a babe, but guess what? She's number 2 for me in that cast.
Oh, you like what's her name?
Number 1, Joanna Cassidy. I got a big old thing for Joanna Cassidy.
She's a babe. Great voice.
Absolute.
Tomorrow's Friday, Eddie. You know what happens here on Friday?
Oh, so good. She was in a sitcom called Buffalo Bill that only lasted 1 season. That's a sidetrack. In an episode that should not have any sidetracks, because we're here to learn about growing up with Kent Walker, son of Sante Kimes. He, like, from the jump, grew up as, like, a theft apprentice.
She was training him from an early age to help her pull off schemes. Petty theft or...
fitting in windows?
Crawling into places to snag stuff or create a distraction so Sante could, I don't know, do something shady. Forge a check, whatever.
Well, as long as it was shady, Sante was in.
And somehow Sante got away with it, again and again.
So Kent was telling Keith about how charismatic his mom was. And one of the examples that he had, which I loved for a multitude of reasons, was they were at the Cock and Bull in Hollywood, which remember Keith was like, I remember it well.
I think the name of the restaurant was the Cock and Bull. It was in Hollywood. I don't think it's there anymore. Yeah.
Wouldn't you love to be at the Cock and Bull in Hollywood partying with Keith Morrison in like the 70s?
When did that close?
I think in the 90s or maybe it made it to the 2000s. It is now a Jaguar dealership. So the building exists and it has a plaque on it. But it hasn't been the Cock and Bull for decades, I think.
That's depressing.
Yeah. Sounded fun. So they're in there at the bar and somebody comes up to Sante and says, hey, can I have your autograph? And without missing a beat, Sante takes the paper and signs her name, Elizabeth Taylor.
Now, Keith made a point of saying, and her son too, Kent, that she looked exactly like Elizabeth Taylor. And hold heads, I'm here to tell you
What?
that this is not correct. This woman did not look like Elizabeth Taylor.
She sure did.
She had super, super tall, like over a foot tall hair, like Marge Simpson style, and it was black. And I guess there was like one period in the 80s when Elizabeth Taylor did that too. I mean, she always had big black hair, but this was clearly not even a look that she would ever do. This was so bad. This woman was not hot. And everyone talked in this episode about how beautiful and charismatic she was. And I'm like, y'all, this woman she's got makeup plastered all over her face. She looks like a clown. She's not pretty. And her eyes are not violet like Elizabeth Taylor's. They're black.
Actually, someone else in this talks about how black they are.
Yeah.
Like they're...
Her eyes were black, like her pupils, they were piercing. When she looked at you, she could look into your soul.
Keith definitely was going along with that she was hot, but I feel like Kent, the son, as soon as he said Elizabeth Taylor, that she looked like him, he was like, okay, I got to qualify this. Sometimes she did. Sometimes she looked like him. Because, like you're saying, it's not even close.
No.
But this is another thing, Kate, where I'm sitting here going, we've taken the internet for granted. Because when I was in LA, I'd go to the ArcLight, you see someone famous. You're not really seeing like a Jim Carrey there. It's somebody on a TV show, and you're like, who is that person? Quick Google, and you could go, is that person? Now, just think back to the 70s. If they wanted to prove to themselves what Elizabeth Taylor looks like, they got to go up to Hollywood Boulevard to a bookstore and buy some press stills from one of her movies. Or like a cover of a magazine.
Maybe. However, she was known for those eyes. It was her whole thing. That was like the qualifier of what she looked like. Violet eyes. And this woman had none of that.
Elizabeth Taylor?
Elizabeth Taylor. She looked that much like Elizabeth Taylor sometimes. She had the charisma, the look, the cheeks, the mouth.
And I think that the only person that I've felt came anywhere close to Elizabeth Taylor was Delta Burke.
I can see that.
Love her. Designing women was my shit.
Why are you police people hanging around here harassing us? Were all the donut shops closed or something?
But they grew up really poor, and Kent was saying that in their fridge they would have peanut butter, cheese, and tortillas. Kate, are they putting all three of those together?
They might. I do recall, remember the Turpin family?
Keep talking.
That creepy family where they had all those kids and they kept them locked in the house for like 18 years.
Okay.
Those kids said that a lot of times the only food they were allowed to eat was tortillas, peanut butter, and cheese.
Wow. Okay. I mean, I guess, cheap and stuff.
Maybe they alternate. Some days it's cheese in the tortillas, other days it's peanut butter.
Okay, I'm hoping that's what Kent did. But luckily, he didn't have to do that for long because Sante had the most brilliant idea of how to catch a man. And that is to go work for a magazine called Palm Springs Millionaire Magazine. She's like, I want a millionaire. I know. I'll work at a magazine that celebrates him.
And was thereby able to interview a man named Kenneth Kimes, a millionaire 20 times over. Sante turned on her charm, and Kenneth was smitten.
This is maybe the only good idea she ever had.
She's ever had.
Because this worked like gangbusters. She got herself a millionaire, like immediately. It sounded like first week there, she found herself a man, and he loved her. He knew that she was a con artist too, and he didn't care.
He was actually friggin' into it. Kenneth Kimes is his name, and Keith makes a point of saying that he was a millionaire 20 times over. At this point in the story, I'm like, cool, Kenneth, do you. But later, I don't like Kenneth so much.
No,
he does some rich guy stuff that's not very cool.
When we see pictures of him at the beginning of their relationship, you're like, yeah, cool. She found herself like a nerd. That's awesome. And then later you're like, oh, look at that guy. He's a sleazy piece of shit.
Yeah, agreed. But in this moment, he's kind of surprised me because as Kent says, Kenneth liked, because also they're super rich. They got 5 houses. It's embarrassing how rich they are.
It was almost embarrassing.
Sante is still out there robbing. She's still thieving.
She can't help herself. And my husband and I were watching this and we were thinking, girl, why didn't you stop there? You had all the money. You had everything you needed. You didn't have to do any more of this. And it's interesting because, Keith said a millionaire 20 times over. Does that mean 20 million?
Well, I mean, they kind of reached the end of the rainbow money-wise, so maybe it was 20 mil.
But
Like they drain it.
But now, that's what I mean. Like, they do drain it eventually, but
Yeah.
now if you had 5 houses, it feels like you would need way more than that. Also, all of their houses were oceanfront property, wherever the house
In
was.
Hawaii, Vegas,
Bahamas.
California.
Why do you need a house in the Bahamas if you have an oceanfront house, multiple oceanfront houses in Hawaii? What do you need the Bahamas for?
Great question.
Did Sante Kimes change her ways, renounce her compulsion to lie and steal? Oh no, not at all. And her compliant husband, Ken Sr., seemed to love it.
Kenneth was into it because, one, he didn't have to buy her car because she was busy stealing them. But also, he liked the feeling of getting away with it. And this is where I differ from old Kenneth, because you can never celebrate getting away with it. You're always almost going to, like, you don't reach the end of the line until you're dead.
Yeah.
I don't understand that mentality. It's never over.
It's never over, and it will eventually catch up with you. You gotta look behind you for the rest of time.
Yeah. So her and Kenneth would have scams together. For instance, one was this bicentennial scam. Another thing that could never happen today.
I was just gonna say that. This is some 1970s bull.
Yes.
So it's the bicentennial, 1976. They managed to get Kenneth some kind of honorary ambassador position just for the bicentennial. It's meaningless. And they knew this, and Kent talked about this. It was not a real ambassadorship. It was just for show. But they somehow used that and used their connections at the United Nations, because, you know, rich people just have friends at the United Nations.
Connections.
To be fair, I do too.
Oh, okay.
And they managed to get themselves to this party at the White House for the bicentennial. And there he is in a photo. They're shaking hands with Gerald Ford and his wife. And then later, Ford's like, wait, who is that guy? And it comes out that they didn't have an invitation. They just walked in. And we saw this not too long ago with Real Housewives of New York people. You remember this? Like 10 years ago.
yes.
Officials are scrambling to figure out how the 2 reality show wannabes got inside Obama's state dinner Tuesday night.
They showed up and just got let in, and no one even asked for their ID or to check their name off a list. Apparently, you can just go.
Yeah, you just got to act like you own the place, and Sante was excellent at doing that. They eventually get busted for that, but not really busted.
The weird stunt was exposed in the Washington Post. Just a hiccup for Sante.
They show an article where they talk about it, but it's not like they got in criminal trouble. It was kind of like, you rascals. And so Sante keeps doing her thing, including swiping mink coats when she's wearing a mink coat. Now this was super smooth. She throws hers over another chair that has one on it, picks it up, takes 2 with her. She gets busted and charged. How did she wiggle out of this, Kate? Keep in mind it's 1980, so loosey-goose time.
Didn't she try to say she had confused it with hers, or she was just trying to...
No, she just didn't show up for the trial.
Oh, right. Yeah.
She straight up didn't show up.
She didn't show, which is so interesting because people knew who she was and where she lived, and she was kind of a public figure in that they were wealthy and very involved in social circles.
Yeah.
So it's not like she was on the run. You don't show up for your trial. Don't you have a bench warrant put out?
In that state, right? I think it comes down to the states aren't connected yet. That must be like the turning point for that, where it's not as easy anymore. But unless that state contacts other states and says, do you have this person? Like, I mean, maybe. I that's the only thing I can believe, because she just straight up walked away. They go back to their house in Hawaii, and they burn one of them down for the insurance money.
Burned it to the ground to collect the insurance money. But she was much too clever to actually do it herself.
Now, I tell you, put that in the bank, because that's going to come back later, okay? But they burn a house down right here. And real quick, one of the people that Keith talks to is Rhonda Martin, who was Kent's girlfriend in high school. Now, she was loving it, and then there was this one time where it got weird because the doorbell rang, and she wanted to answer it, and then Sante flew over the counter. Do you remember this?
Yep. Grabbed her around the collar, got real close to her, and she said, we have 2 rules in this house. 1, we don't answer the phone. 2, we do not answer the door.
Yeah, and Rhonda's like, okay.
Got it.
I mean, I was this close to her face. It was so close. I could feel her breath.
I mean, I think if I were Rhonda in that moment, I would have laughed and been like, yeah, same. Because I don't answer the phone when I don't know the number. And if someone rings my door, I don't answer it.
Yeah. When people knock on my door now, or the last 20 years, it's been like, who the is here right now?
Exactly.
Who is here, right?
Exactly.
So Rhonda, her days are numbered around the old Kimes estate, and that's when Kent gets busted stealing, of all things, a surfboard. Okay.
And his mom, instead of punishing him like any other mother would do, she takes him back to the scene of the crime and tells him how he should have done it differently so that he wouldn't have gotten caught.
I mean, this is straight up movie shit. Like, this is insane. And I want to know what her pro tips were, because I would be, hey, steal a shirt or something, bro. A surfboard is kind of conspicuous.
Not something gigantic.
Like when Kent was 12 and still his mother's little helper. And one day, on his own, he stole a surfboard and got busted.
I thought I was going to go to jail.
So Rhonda is like, hey, man, like, I love you, but why are you stealing things? You don't want to get caught up in that life. And he's like, you know what? You're right. I don't want to do that. So he tells his mom, like, you know what? I think I'm done. And Rhonda supports that. And Sante's like, I'm sorry. What?
So Sante's reaction to this is, one, to call Rhonda's mom and say, don't you ever let your daughter over here ever again. And then we hear from Rhonda. This was wild. She goes, I got a call from Hawaii 5-0, which I didn't realize that's what they called the cops. I thought that was just the name of the show. With chicken or egg, Kate? Was that what the show was named after, or the other way around?
The show was definitely named after that. That had to have been an existing Hawaii thing.
Yeah.
A lieutenant from Hawaii 5-0 showed up at my house and knocked on the door.
All right, so Rhonda's mom gets a call from Sante Kurt. Okay. Rhonda's mom gets a call from Sante that says, don't let your daughter over here. Now, just to make sure that doesn't happen, Sante does another thing. And this is when the Hawaii 5-0 call up Rhonda and say, bad news, Sante's got a hit out on you. So, like, keep your head down. Literally, they say, keep your head out of the windows.
And while we were watching this, my husband was like, well, wait a minute. Why is she not arrested then? If they know this.
Well, I mean, but you know that they could only get her arrested if they had it on tape or something, right? Like, we've seen this before. I feel like now is when they go, okay, so now you got it. We'll wire you up and you go ask her about it.
That lieutenant told me, don't stick your head up. Because if you contact him, she'll find you and she will kill you.
This is when things start to go downhill. Kent is out of there. He leaves his little brother Kenny behind. He joins the army. Okay. And this is when so Sante does a lot of bad shit in this episode. She really only gets the full extent of the law with 2 of them. And this is the first time when the help comes for her. She was apparently yelling and abusing her staff, like hitting them with stuff, yelling at them, degrading them, and all the staff joined together to file a suit against her.
The women complained to law enforcement.
She would lock the maids in their rooms. They were under constant watch, and I believe she attacked one of them with a hot iron once.
And this thing was taken for real, and they have her, Sante even got deposed. Is that the word? And she's on the videotape going, I hate that I'm here. I am Sante Kimes, okay?
I'm very unhappy with having to give any testimony to you. I have been through an intolerable nightmare.
Like, she hates it, and we're loving it. Now, this will be a trend in Sante's life, but they bring charges against Sante and Kenneth. And the charges are wild. They're like involuntary slavery. Like Keith even says, like, these old-ass laws about anti-slavery, they're charged with. Now, Kenneth does the right move and pleads out because he wants to get away from this as soon as he can. Not Sante. She goes to trial, fights it, loses, gets 3 years in jail. That's pretty crazy, right? The staff must have been so stoked when that happened.
They must have been. But she got out of jail and everything went back to exactly the way it was.
Right back 3 years, because Kent came home to care for his little brother, and then when mom came home, right back to normal. We're stealing we're living life on the edge. We're burning houses for insurance money. Like, it was all still happening.
Kenneth just waited for her. He didn't move on or anything. It was just business as usual. And we see home video footage of it too, because by this point, Kent has like gone off and started his own family, and Grandma Sante is there holding his kid. And you would never know that she had just done hard time. They're just hanging out in their palatial estate in Hawaii, like everything's fine.
Yeah, and you hear Kent on the camera going like, thanks for this. This was great, fam. Love you, boo. Like it was...
Last day here. Been a great vacation. Thanks for everything, guys.
It was really funny because it was clearly like, this guy has young kids. He's like, okay, I know my mom is nuts, but she does have a palatial estate in Hawaii. Like, I must take kids to this, right? Like, I feel like she could be evil incarnate and he'd still take her up on it because it's too perfect.
I think as long as she wasn't trying to get his kids to steal stuff for her, he was fine with it.
Yeah, the second that happened, then he would say, okay, wait a minute, back in the station wagon. But it does all come crashing down, and that's when old Kenneth Sr. bites it. Kent gets a call from his mom, and she's like, they wouldn't save him.
His mother was telling him that Ken Sr., his stepfather, had died. And after, Sante seemed unhinged, even more than usual.
So Kenneth has now died, and Sante's freaking out because guess what? They done spent all that money.
They did.
And now Kenneth's not there to earn stuff anymore.
They still had several properties and money in an offshore account. And I'm thinking, okay, you've got several properties that have appreciated in value over the years because now it's the 90s. You can sell those oceanfront properties and then you have money. She had enough to live. She did not have enough to continue their lavish lifestyle because
there it is.
Kenneth was making money up until the day he died.
Yeah.
I do think it was weird, though, that they didn't really have anything in place. And kind of surprising, considering what a con artist she is, that she wouldn't have convinced Kenneth to have all of these, like, life insurance policies or something that she could benefit from. But he died, and she was essentially panicked.
Yeah, I think you're right, though. It's that she couldn't keep the same lifestyle. She still would have been just fine if she would cool it a little. But she's like, when I have 6 homes, I can't have 5, okay?
Yeah.
Can't do it. So now they're freaking out, and this is when Kent didn't have any contact with him anymore.
The frenzy of it all spooked Kent. He eventually stopped taking her calls.
I had made a break from Mom and Kenny. We were estranged.
But Keith says this is when they moved to Brentwood, California. And we go to Brentwood, and just around the time that they show up in town, what does a detective find in a dumpster in an alley behind LAX, Kate? What's in that dumpster?
That would be a man named David Kasdan, who lived way up in the valley, nowhere near LAX.
30 miles from the dumpster where he ended up.
When they find out this guy's identity, they go to his house, and nobody's there, but the carpet is pristine. It's like super clean in there. And no one is home, but his daughter is like, someone was kind of lurking around these past few weeks, and he was getting harassed. And the daughter knows the name of this harasser. And what was that name?
Sante Kimes.
Yes, that's Sante Kimes.
Boom. So now the detective has to do some digging on old Sante Kimes. This is when I started losing faith in Kenneth, because they find out that, like, to dodge taxes and stuff, David Kasdan was like a buddies with Kenneth. And they owned a house in Vegas. And they hit up David at some point and said, hey, can we put your name on this house just cause so we don't have to pay taxes or whatever? And he was like, sure, do it. But then Kenneth dies and David wants the hell out of there. He's like, hey, Sante, take my name off. You're nuts. And without Kenneth, I don't want anything to do with you.
And
right?
she says she will, but she doesn't.
Instead, she does. And this is the 90s. This is not the 70s anymore. So again, she's pulling magic tricks. Walks into a bank, gets a $280,000 loan under David Kasdan's name, and walks out of there.
I don't know how you can do that. Because...
neither did the detective.
So David Kasdan is on the deed to the house. Is he on it with her?
No.
He's the sole
it was a trust
name on the deed? Because if she's on there with him, I could see how she could take the loan out on the house because she's also on the deed. But if it's just him, it makes absolutely no sense how she was able to do that other than, I guess, flirting.
Yeah, and actually her next step, which is also evil, is she burns that house down for the insurance money. Is something else she does, Kate. So like her name's on the insurance though. Like you can't keep this woman down. She's always got a fresh con going.
I don't understand, because you have to have the person there to take the loan out. Even in the 90s, you have to be there in person, have all these forms of identity. She just went in and said, like, he's my friend. I'm going to take a loan out in his name.
She went down to a bank, Mrs. Kimes did, and she's the one that tricked the bank into taking a loan out of Mr. Kasdan. I don't know how she did it. I don't know how the bank allowed her to do it.
Okay, so Kasdan's name is on there, and when he catches wind about this loan, because he starts getting bills that are like, you owe us like thousands of dollars a month, please. And he's like, why? Finds out about this con. The bank gets onto it. Sante straight up calls David Kasdan and warns him and says, hey, I wouldn't talk about this stuff if I were you. You might end up dead, dude. Right? And we find this out because there was a PI hired to look into this.
She calls him back and she says, you know, asking questions about the loan, something to the effect won't be good for your health.
Okay, yeah, Vegas house burns down. Sante tries to cash in the insurance money. Does not work. So they're on the run at this point. Now, the cops believe Sante killed Kasdan. Sounds like a pretty good guess. So now this detective we're talking to, who had great upper lip for a mustache, but he had like day one of a mustache. Did you see this guy?
I'm sure I did, but I did not take note of the facial hair.
His upper lip was just so good for a mustache. It was like straight across. It was crazy. He was kind of a cool guy.
Good, honey.
So now this detective in LA is on the trail of Sante, but they're always one step behind. Okay? They find out that the Kimes, Sante and Kenny Jr., have fled to Utah. So now he's chasing them down, and he finds out that they found a dealership in Utah, traded in their town car, because they said, I love that Keith is like, Sante only rode in town cars. Like, she was a big town car gal.
They had left L.A. in Sante's preferred mode of transport, a Lincoln town car.
Well, hey, Car Kate, weigh in here. What do you think of a town car?
This, to me, was a sign that she was trashy.
Really?
Because back in the day, a Cadillac or a Lincoln town car was what, like, trashy people thought rich people drove. Why is she not in a Mercedes? Why is she in a Lincoln town car?
That's really funny, Kate. That's a good point. Before you said she was trashy, I was like, to me, it says old money. Kurt.
No.
I don't know what I'm talking about.
Old money would be a Volvo or a Saab or some old Land Rover. But... Yeah. No.
Not a town car.
Not a Lincoln town car. A car that a chauffeur picks you up to take you to the airport in.
Yeah, that's a good point. But she loves it. And so they take it to a dealership and they convince the guy to do a trade-in. They want to upgrade to a better town car. And to deal with the difference in price, Sante writes him a check. And now, what happens to this check, Kate? Naturally.
Well, naturally, the check bounces. And they've stolen this car.
Yeah, straight up. And there's a warrant out for their arrest.
And the local sheriff issued warrants for Sante and Kenny, wanted for grand theft auto.
And so now there's that warrant out, but this detective still cannot find them. But when he's in Vegas snooping around, or as Keith says, sleuthing around.
And then, sleuthing paid off.
He finds a guy who did odd jobs for the Kimes. And he says, listen, if Sante calls you up again, do me a fave, record it and tell me what's up with her. And he's like, okay, sure, I guess I will. Time passes. This guy, Stan Patterson, is the handyman. And so Stan calls up the cops and says, okay, Sante just called me. She's offered me a job. They live in New York City and they want me to manage a building that they just found. Or like they now own a building and they want me to run it for them, right? This is, I mean, right in their lap. And so the cops are like, ooh, okay, so now here's what you got to do, Stan. You got to go to New York, and we're going to do a sting op. We're going to catch them when they come meet you at the Hilton lobby or whatever. Okay, so this sting. Do you remember Keith when he finds out how long the sting was? It was 8 hours, right? Like they're waiting at this Hilton for Stan. And Stan, by the way, they told him to come with a gun. And he's not the cops. Sante told him to bring a gun. Okay, so the cops, all set for this sting, they wait 8 hours, and they're about to pack it in.
Well, we waited about 8 hours.
Good Lord.
And then they hear this screeching voice of Sante ring through the lobby. She has arrived. But no Kenny yet, so they still wait a minute. Stan grabs a drink with Sante in the lobby. And then Kenny shows up, and this is when the arrest happens. And old Kenny puts up a fight, doesn't he? They find like brass knuckles on him. He's got like a knife. Do you remember what happened when they did catch him? How did Kenny react?
I don't remember.
He pissed himself. He literally pissed himself.
Yeah, he peed his pants.
Yeah.
As we were struggling with him, he urinated in his pants, wet his pants.
Now, was that out of fear, or was that like, you cops do my laundry? Like, which one was it, you think?
That's out of fear. He had some serious Arrested Development going on because, as Kent said, Kenny never had a chance. He had been groomed by his mother from the time he was an infant. And he was not really a whole full-formed person. So I'm sure he was scared and just pissed himself.
So they arrest him and throw him in jail. And it's the next day when that sketch hits the news of Manny Guerin. And that's when this cop who was on the sting is like, no, that guy's name is Kenny Kimes. His mom is Sante, and I've got him arrested. And here's what's even better news, other cops. On Sante's person, she had the passport that belonged to one Irene Silverman.
I'm your Auntie May.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yep.
Now we got it connected. Now the parties are connected. But they want more. And so that's when they get their hands on that friggin' town car. And now this thing's a friggin' gold mine. Do you remember this moment? They find the town car that... Oh, also, wait. They were late for 8 hours because they said there was traffic in Jersey. We'll find out later. It wasn't. They were doing body disposal.
They were dumping a body.
Yeah. But they take a look at this town car. Do you remember the shit that they found in there? It was like gun, liquid to knock people out, a taser box. Oh, and Sante had notes and notes and notes on Irene. Like they were fucking planning this thing, right?
This was planned from the jump. I think she met Irene at some party. It was all part of the plan that Kenny would go and try to rent a room from her. They would wait for a couple weeks and then kill her and take this house, which...
Yeah, that they were going to do.
Confusing how that was going to happen, considering it was full of tenants and a whole full-time staff.
Yeah.
I could see how she could pretend to be Irene and use her identity to take possession of it, but people would quickly realize that she wasn't Irene, and then what is the staff going to do, and what are the tenants going to do? It was not a very thought-out plan, honestly.
No, and they were waiting. What Stan's job was going to be was to get rid of the current tenants. So they were kind of putting a lot of weight on the shoulders of Stan, the guy with the bulletproof vest and the gun and the wire.
Now, did they want him to kill all of the tenants, or did they want him to just kind of scare them so that they would leave?
I think just intimidate them out of there, right? Maybe that's what the gun was for. They're like, it doesn't have to be loaded if you want to be a little baby about it.
Right.
But just go knock on the door with a gun and say, keep walking, people. Get out of here. Get out of here. I don't think it would have worked.
No.
But so now they are 100%. These crimes are now connected. Okay, so now we've got two deaths. We've got David Kasdan out in California, and we don't know what's up with Irene Silverman, but we're thinking she's probably dead. This hits the news wire all over the world. So far that the cops in the Bahamas hear about it. And now why does this cop in the Bahama know the name Sante Kimes?
Because she and Kenneth had a home there, and also they had accounts there.
Yeah, well, they had accounts. Now, here's the problem. When Kenneth died, there wasn't any, like, she didn't have access to it. So she was pretending that Kenneth was still alive, like to get his benefits and whatnot, okay? And this is at an offshore account in the Bahamas. That's why we're offshore. Like, that's so, like, shady rich talk. An offshore account.
It's
straight
typically
up shady rich stuff.
It's typically in the Caymans, not in the Bahamas.
Oh, good call. Do you know that because you have your own, or can you not say?
No.
There's this nosy little bank auditor named Syed Ahmed. Now, this was 2 years earlier, okay? So this is like 96 or something. And he's getting suspicious. And all he wants to do is get together with the Kimes and say, what's up? Like, Kenneth, are we good? Are you alive? Is this a legal thing that we're doing? So they get together for a dinner. And they party. And they talk to Sante and Kenny and Ahmed. They all sit together and toast a glass. But then the next day, reported missing. Syed Ahmed. Nowhere to be found. Doesn't come back to work. And the Kimes are also gone. Right?
Yeah. He's another one of their victims.
This is now a third dead body. Okay? That they had successfully avoided capture for 2 years. Right? And guess what? 3 dead bodies and we're not done.
No.
That's what's nuts. I mean, she's a full-on serial killer technically, but I don't think she fits the other things, but she's got more bodies coming.
But was it Kenny who actually did the murdering?
Yeah, I guess she would be in the Charles Manson role. Like she was the one pulling the strings. She was the puppeteer. You're right. Okay, so now there's 3 murders, and this is when shit gets weird and we start talking incest. Because Sante and Kenny do an interview on 60 Minutes. Tell us about this interview, Kate. And I want to know what you think. Are they knocking boots? Familial boots.
This interview raised a lot of eyebrows then and now. They are sitting
Yeah.
very, very close together and holding hands.
There they were, mother and son, accused murderers, looking a little too intimate.
I was married to a wonderful man. He was a big old Irishman. Kenny looks a lot like him.
And you can
Yeah,
see
we got a close-up of the-
they cut to the hands and a little close-up, and her thumb is like rubbing his hand. Now,
Yeah, it's moving. It's moving.
I want this so badly to be incestuous because because it's so rare that we see it between a mother and a son that when I do see it, I just find it so salacious and fascinating.
It's true.
I honestly don't know if that was happening. And Kent also was skeptical that that was happening.
The whole incest thing, it was weird.
Yeah, it just...
I mean, and it's catnip, you know.
I don't believe it. It's not because I don't want to believe it. I know it didn't happen.
What we do know, though, like we mentioned earlier, is that Kenny Jr. was manipulated by his mother from a very early age. He didn't know anything else. I think they were just insanely close in a gross way, but maybe not.
Yeah, I don't think it was sexual. I think it, like, even Sante's fan club, this lady that was a PI at the time, we talked to her. She's got nothing but good things to say about Sante. She says maybe it's emotional incest.
But maybe there is such a thing as an emotional incest.
Now, this all started because someone in Florida that, like, worked with them somehow said that they walked into a hotel room and they were in the bed together naked. Now, I'm calling bullshit on this. They were probably in bed in what they sleep in. And they were sharing the bed because they're too close.
Right.
And they're on the run. They're not getting two beds. They're not worried about it. I think that's what was going on there.
Right. I think so, too. I mean, I've shared a bed with my mother plenty of times. It's weird, but also we're not ever naked. But like you said, he probably had like pants or boxers on. She probably had some like silk negligee because that's how she rolled.
She loved white muumuus and whatnot. Big fan.
The guy they picked up in Florida, when they drove up the coast, he claims that he went into the room, he walked in and they were in bed naked together.
Yeah, I'm calling BS.
It
on
wasn't
that.
like someone opened the door and they had to really quick cover themselves with sheets and like roll off each other.
Yeah.
That's not what was going on.
Yeah, but we also do hear a weird-ass moment, and I'm getting like, it's making my face do a prune thing when I think about it. It's when Kenneth compliments his mother on her looks and stuff on
He says how beautiful she is. She's not
Didn't care for
beautiful.
that.
She's not beautiful. She looks
That's
crazy.
your beef? Kenny, you're wrong.
Well, he's
Your
a
mom's
liar.
no-go.
He's lying.
And there was the gushing about how beautiful his mother was.
I think she's a beautiful person, spiritually and intellectually, and physically.
What was going on here exactly?
Okay. He's lying. All right, so now they are on trial for these murders in New York. And now before, when they tried to get Kenny talking, it didn't work. But now he's ready to testify against his mom. Now, so they go to trial, and Kenny and Sante are offered deals, just like with the slavery charges. And Sante follows suit and says, you know what, just like then, I'm going to court. I'm not guilty, damn it. I want you guys to put me in jail. So they got to have a trial for Sante, and freaking Kenny's up there on the stand spilling the deets, right?
Yeah.
Just rang out in the courtroom over and over and over again. Guilty, 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 guilty.
He gets sent to a prison upstate. And now, Holtheads, we're nearing the end of this Dateline, and we're thinking, boy, I got to catch my breath. Certainly nothing else nuts is going to go down. And then something happens that you only imagine happens. Kate, do you want to talk about this? We had a lady go to interview her for Court TV. Take it away.
This is like the height of Court TV. She gets this exclusive interview with Kenny. She goes to the prison, meets him in one of these visitation rooms. She's got a whole camera crew with her. And
we see it.
We see clips of this interview. And
are you saying, though, that Mrs. Silverman was aware that you were sharing the apartment with your mother?
Absolutely.
He's being a little sweaty. He's being a little dodgy and uncomfortable. And several times he asks if he can go to the bathroom.
Could we take a break in maybe 5 or 10 minutes?
So he leaves a few times. And when he comes back the second or third time, this interviewer can tell something is not quite right.
Yeah, and she's got like a Snickers bar for him.
He says, can I get something to eat? So she goes over to the vending machine and gets him a Snickers.
Yeah.
And as she's handing it to him, he takes her hostage. He has a
With
pen,
their pen.
which we see in the footage of the interview. He's flipping this pen around.
Yeah.
He holds the pen to her throat and takes her hostage, even though they are not alone in this room. But they have to bring in like a hostage negotiator to get him to let her go. And it's actually this interviewer that kind of saves her own hide. She talks to him about religion and asks, should we pray? And that kind of distracts him a little bit.
Right.
And they're able to take him down.
Well, that loosens him up a little bit. That's the first step to it. But then the hostage negotiator says, hey, Kenny, I want to help you out. So here, dude, real quick, here's my business card. Just take this so you can call me later at your convenience. And that's when they jump him, because Kenny's dumbass took the card.
He took the pen away from her neck to take the card, and they just pounced on him.
Idiot! Kenny is dangerously stupid. Do you remember what he wanted in this negotiation? He wanted to be extradited to Canada. For what? I don't know.
I don't think he knows what extradition is.
No.
That doesn't mean you get to be free in another country. That means you need to go back and face charges somewhere.
And he said, my mom's coming with me because she's an elderly woman and she can't survive in prison. She'd still be in prison in Canada, dude, if this could happen.
It made
He's
no
a
sense.
dum-dum.
He clearly did not understand how the world worked because he was never really in the world.
It's true. That is so true. So Keith's got the lady on there talking to her. It's pretty sweet. And not only that, they've got about, 3 seconds of the hostage sitch on tape.
The Core TV crew recorded a few seconds of it until Kenny demanded they stop.
2 handcuffs. Hold on. 1 blanket. Back. Cameraman, back.
I bet they aired that on Court TV.
I wonder. I mean, why wouldn't they? That's like a dream.
Court TV was all about that. That was like hard copy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got to look on YouTube for that to see if it's there. Okay, so that settles, but now they got to go out to California for those murders.
California was waiting to try them for the murder of David Kasdan. Mother and son faced the death penalty for that one.
And so now they go out there, and Kenny's ready to talk again. He's got pleas ready, and he says, listen, I'll tell you everything you want to know. I'll testify against my mom again, but you got to take the death penalty off the table for both of us. And it's like, they say yes to it immediately. And guess what? Sante's not taking a plea. She goes to trial in 2004. She's fighting this because she's innocent, damn it.
She maintains this, that she's innocent till the end.
And it's during this trial, I think, this is what I was confused about, is Kenny describes how all the murders went down, right? Like Irene, Sante came in and was talking to her in bed, turned the TV on loud, and then Kenneth choked her out in the bathtub. And he's like, I don't know how long to do it. And I want to say, it's like 4.5 minutes, dude. You don't have the strength. So he's in there going, ah! That's how she dies. They dump her body in a trash can in Hoboken. Hoboken. And so that was the traffic jam that they were at for 8 hours, was disposing of that body. And then he keeps talking about how he killed Kasdan. He shot him because he knocked on the front door because Kasdan knew Kenny was like, come on in, Ken.
He offered him a Coke or something.
Yeah. So that's when he shoots him. And I assume they replaced the carpet, hence the pristine carpet.
And
They're on the way home to see Mom. Kenny stopped and bought a $100 bouquet of flowers to give to her to celebrate the job accomplished.
And then we even hear the details of the murder of Syed. And this is sad as hell. Before they go to the dinner with him, they fill the tub because they know what tonight's all about. They slip him a Mickey. When he gets too wasted, they bring him back to the room, drown his ass.
But Kenny noted that he was much harder to kill.
Yeah, he did. He was like, he was a lot stronger than I thought he would be. I really wish Kenny had lost that fight. And Syed was here telling us the scoop. Okay, now again, you think, well, we gotta be done now. Nope. 4th murder time! Because we talk about friggin' Elmer. Now remember, way back at the beginning, when we heard about this guy who set a fire to one of their properties for the insurance money.
but she was much too clever to actually do it herself.
You gotta roll over on these people, or you're going down. So now they've got a CI on their hands. But Sante and Kenneth, this is back when Kenneth is still alive, they catch wind of this. And what's their reaction? What do they do with Elmer when they find out that he's flipped?
They kill him.
They take him on a vacation to Costa Rica, and Elmer doesn't come back.
Nope. Oh, he went off one day, walked down the beach. We didn't see him again.
And the poor guy, the guy's son, Elmer's son, is talking to Keith, and he was like, they wouldn't even, it's not an open case. Like, they don't care. The DA or whoever said, what do you care? We got him for 3 other murders. And Elmer's like, well, it would be kind of cool if my dad had some justification, or like Keith had a great way to word it, where he was like, at least his name would be known.
Elmer Holmgren's name would have been there as somebody whose death had been accounted for.
So this is the 4th murder.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, actually, oh my God, I'm sorry, I was about to wrap it up. We can't, because old Keith goes to talk to Kenneth. So this is why this episode happened, because in August of 2023, Sante Kimes dies in 2014. She dies, her heart gives up or something. Flash forward to 2023, Kenny is ready to sit down with Keith. This is the first interview since he tried to take somebody hostage and go to Canada, okay? This is the first one since then. How does this go? I mean, this is another disaster, IMO.
Unfortunately, this is just audio. You can't be there in person. It's just Keith talking to him on speakerphone.
You see a pic.
With a jailhouse pic of Kenny, who looks wildly different.
Thank you. That's why he doesn't look a damn thing like himself when he was younger.
No, not at all.
It looks like he had face surgery or something.
It didn't look like him. I mean, I understand that it was him. It's not like I don't believe it. But
right.
Jail has been rough for him.
Absolutely.
So this interview is definitely a disaster. Keith can't really get anything useful out of it. He does a similar thing that he did in the Court TV interview, where he has to start and stop it a lot and take breaks. And then we hear that. And we also very quickly realized that the only reason he wanted to do this interview was to pull another con. And it's...
Okay.
And this time, he can't even... It's not going to work because he doesn't have his mom pulling the strings. This is all his harebrained idea. He doesn't want to talk about anything else other than how he wants to raise money for the children. It's very vague.
It's very vague.
And it's just a way for him to do what's right. It's his redemption arc. He's done a lot of soul searching in prison, and he thinks the way that he can be the change that the world needs is if he raises millions for the children. And Keith sees right through this. Clearly, Kenny wants Dateline to give him millions for some bogus charity. And it's not happening. And Keith doesn't even let him kind of go down that road. He's like, yeah. But about your mother.
Wait, hang on. Before Keith asked about the mom, specifically what Kenny called this was tangible contrition. He came in there with he had buzzwords for Keith.
Engage in what I would call tangible contrition.
And now Keith was open to continue to discuss it, but dumb Kenny literally didn't have the next step to his plan. Now, I wrote down what it was his plan was, because it was absurd on 4 different levels. Ready? He goes, if I could raise $1 million, okay, and then you could let me be military trained in here on film, and it'll help the kids. A million questions right there. What does any of that mean?
What does that mean, Kenny? You would undergo military training while still incarcerated, but they would bring cameras in here to film you doing it.
On film, too, BT dubs.
Film, not video.
Hilarious.
Or
no way video.
Just
gotta be on film.
Just film.
Could I do basic military training on film while in custody?
The kids would benefit how? And why do you need millions?
How does military training... Is it because the kids got the $1 million? So is he like, hey, cops, look the other way, but send military in here to train me as a prisoner?
I don't get it. I mean, he's clearly not well.
No, and Keith tries... Now is when Keith is like, all right, well, let's talk about your mom. And this is when he says, hey, Keith, can we just take a 5 to 10 minute break?
Yeah, there was no... They cut off
Can
all...
Could we take a little break real quick? And do what?
Yeah.
I'm quoting myself from 20 years ago when I said this to Court TV.
Mm-hmm.
He same move. Same freaking move.
Can we take a break in maybe 5 or 10 minutes?
And he eventually gets back on the phone, but it doesn't really last. He kind of it ends.
He wants to talk about his contrition again. Because all Keith asks is, hey, did Sante have any regrets? Or did she go down did she, go to the end of the line as Sante? Did she not have no regrets? And he can't even answer that question.
No, he's like, I just want to talk about the children.
Yeah.
It's very...
That's literally what he says!
It's very weird. It's very weird and kind of pointless. And then Kent is like, yeah, I don't really visit Kenny that often.
No.
We're cordial, but it's clear that his life is something completely different. And you can tell even by the way he's dressed. He's dressed like a very, how do I put it? Like successful, I guess, businessman who doesn't do cons and crimes, and he has a very level head on him, and he's choosing to separate himself from all of this drama.
Yeah. Oh, and you know what? We got to give him a shout out. He's the one that convinced Kenny to talk, to squeal. Because he was like, don't make me tell my kids that their uncle is a whatever. Like, so we got to give him credit there, right?
I also thought it was kind of sad when we were talking to his high school girlfriend, and she was like, Kent thinks that I just stopped talking to him and left because I didn't like him anymore.
Yeah.
But I loved him, and I was being threatened by his mother, and he has no idea. And I was like, well, I hope you can tell him now or reconnect, or at least he's going to see this and be like, oh, that's nice to know.
I could have used, like, you know how they love to wrap up stuff in these docs? Sometimes the last 5 minutes of a doc are kind of snooze fest because it's just people hugging. Hey, bring those two together.
Let's do a meet and greet on the beach in Hawaii.
Exactly.
And I mean, I get it. They both have families of their own now, and it was young childhood love. But she was getting choked up. She was crying about it.
I thought that too. I was like, man, I hope Kent's cool with it. Because he literally would, like, that's when he left and joined the army and stuff. Mm-hmm. So it was straight up. Speaking of army, it's about time to go to those lists. Now, I say about time, Kate. Because one quick thing, I'm sorry. I got to introduce a new seg. Now, it's about the B-roll, okay? But it's not a B-roll you busted. It's not a BYB. It's a BYC. Do you know what the C stands for?
B-roll you crazy.
B-roll you crushing. This is one Dateline actually does some good B-roll. And I got to give him a mad shout out for this episode because we didn't say it, but like Kent sat down with Keith 20 years ago and stuff. This episode had a ton of old video, 4x3 video. And I think to mix it up a little bit so it wasn't just them zooming in on poor quality SD, is I think they were actually shooting playback of this stuff in like their control room. Like we see, like usually I can tell when stuff is just comped in. You can tell real easy. But this had like that what not moire, but had like that stuff that happens when you're recording the screen. Like if it wasn't real, they fooled the hell out of me. And I thought it looked great, and I hope they do more of it. And that's why I'm here to say BYC, B-roll, you're crushing. All right, Kate, you got anything for your list?
Kate's unnamed list. All right. Well, we've got the military connection. We've got Kent, who went off to the military, and Kenny, who wanted to be trained by the military.
God, you're right. Oh, you're 100%. You're right.
And there was a Florida connection briefly.
Yeah. Because that's where they slept in the same bed.
But I was waiting
I didn't make that up.
for them to say that one of their vacation homes was in Florida. But it wasn't. But they seem like the type where it would be like, yeah, Hawaii, Vegas, Bahamas, obviously like Miami, right? But no.
Yeah, that is weird. But Florida's definitely on there, though.
Mm-hmm. I heard it
I wonder
once.
I wonder if they did. They had to have had a place in Florida. They had to have, right? Like they got to have a house out on the East Coast.
They had to have, especially because Florida's so cheap. Back then, they could have gotten more bang for their buck.
Yeah.
But
and Sante would have ruled the roost down there, just being Sante all over the place.
Like Palm Beach, totally.
Yeah.
But I only remember hearing a mention of Florida once. And we do have a car, that Lincoln Town Car.
Yeah, classy. Mm-hmm. That's right. That's true. It played a huge part in this. It was their getaway vehicle. It's why they ultimately got busted.
Yeah.
Right? And it was full. I imagine opening that trunk up and seeing all their shit in there. It's like evil stuff, right? Like it's duct tape and guns and stuff.
So stupid. And all of those notebooks where she took meticulous notes and wrote down their crimes.
I want to read those notebooks. I want to read Sante describing Irene and her daily activities.
Mm.
Give me that ebook, Kate. Wouldn't you swoop that as an ebook? I'd be on it.
I'd let you be on it for me.
It's good. That's good. Because I would have filled you in. Faux show.
I think that's going to do it for my list.
Pretty good. 3 things, though.
Mm-hmm.
That's a full list. On to Kurt's Kick-Ass List.
Kick-Ass List.
Okay. Now, we're talking movies and TV because we got the Court TV mention, of course. Also, Elizabeth Taylor. That's very Hollywood. That counts on my list. That's the loosest part of my list. That one fits right in. I'm also counting Hawaii 5-0 because I'm not... Because somebody was thinking about the television show Hawaii Five-0 when she said that, right? I think that's a safe ad. And I wonder, it makes me want to see if Hawaii Five-0 is on Blu-ray. That sounds like another show I would dig if they shot on film and it's been remastered. Like 1960s Hawaii television.
And what about the Rosalind Russell thing?
Auntie Mame!
I'm your Auntie May!
Great point! I forgot I gotta watch that movie tonight. Okay. Yeah, you're right. So that's Hollywood as well. No signs of struggling. They cleaned it all up. Every time there was a sign of a struggle, they were on it. I think that's it. This was such a beast of a Dateline and a beast of a record because it was a dope-ass Dateline. Who knows what I missed. But, I mean, this was a banger. This made me think of Man with No Name, honestly.
Totally. Best of the season so far.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah, exactly. This is a Lesty frontrunner, okay? Absolutely, this is a Lesty frontrunner. Woo! And on that note, I'm Kurt Money.
I'm Kateline.
I'm Lester Holt. For all of us, I'm Lester Holt. Good night.